Picture a 35-year-old auto body painter, casually sitting face-to-face with detectives inside a bleak Washington interrogation room. This seemingly ordinary father was brought in for one chilling reason: police suspected him of slaughtering countless innocent girls. Detectives kept discovering corpses scattered near a waterway roughly 30 miles below Seattle, but the suspect firmly denied everything before taking a lie detector test. The testing equipment completely validated his innocence. These devices supposedly track bodily distress indicators like sweat, pulse, and breathing during interrogations. Operating on the flawed notion that dishonesty automatically triggers extreme anxiety, the equipment simply records biological panic fluctuations. Yet, the underlying science behind this methodology is entirely bogus. Nevertheless, during 1984, King County officials viewed these results as absolute truth, ultimately letting a monster walk entirely free. He casually strolled outside, returned to his daily routine, and mercilessly resumed his murder spree. While detectives spent 17 years chasing his shadow, leads continuously poured in. Countless suspects were interrogated, and fresh corpses routinely surfaced. And meanwhile, the very same individual who beat their interrogation equipment went about his daily job, attended religious services, and mercilessly claimed more victims. Authorities considered this phantom untraceable, entirely oblivious to the terrifying reality that flawed technology had previously blinded them to his overwhelming guilt. What follows is a dark exploration of life after a deceptive assessment, highlighting what these contraptions fail to foresee and utterly fail to halt, serving simultaneously as a grim warning to the predator who snatched an 84-year-old grandmother named Nancy Guthrie. She resided in a picturesque Tucson community known as the Catalina Foothills, surrounded by sprawling desert scenery, secure properties, and breathtaking peaks. A devout churchgoer who rarely missed Sunday worship, she proudly raised Savannah, Annie, and Cameron. Unbeknownst to many, her youngest girl is actually an incredibly prominent national broadcast journalism star. On the night of January 31st, 2026, Hamaso Chioni chauffeured her home after dinner. After ensuring she safely stepped through her front door around 9:50 that evening, she vanished without a single trace. Alarm bells rang the following morning when she shockingly missed her digital Sunday worship, prompting a concerned fellow parishioner to contact her relatives. Loved ones rushed over near 11 in the morning, frantically scoured the premises, and ultimately dialed 911 right before midday. From day one, County Sheriff Chris Nanos maintained a brutally straightforward stance. He bluntly declared that the forensic clues left behind painted a clear picture of a brutal abduction rather than a voluntary disappearance. Chances are high that you already understand the ensuing media circus, having frantically refreshed your feeds for updates on that chilling porch surveillance clip, or that terrifying disguised intruder lurking by her entrance before dawn on February 1st, along with the discarded mitten recovered 2 miles down the road, the sinister ransom letters and $1.2 million bounty, alongside thousands of dead-end clues that failed to produce a culprit. Yet here we sit on day 46 in mid-March 2026, and she remains utterly lost. Police remain completely empty-handed without a single identified perpetrator, which ultimately brings us to the sinister core of this entire presentation. We are entirely sidestepping the current lack of cuffs to aggressively focus on the absolute inevitability of justice. So pay close attention. Let us jump back to that supposedly innocent suspect who miraculously beat the lie detector inside a Washington precinct during 1984. Detectives possessed his file and had him locked in their crosshairs. Yet they foolishly released the notorious predator known as Gary Ridgway. How exactly did the equipment fail so spectacularly against a man who would eventually become America's most ruthlessly prolific mass murderer? This psychopath slaughtered 49 victims across the Pacific Northwest, cramming his carnage between 1982 and 1984. He explicitly hunted marginalized, defenseless girls living rough, assuming society would simply ignore their sudden violent disappearances. He was remarkably patient, deeply calculated, and terrifyingly precise. Yet when dragged in for questioning regarding the expanding graveyard near Seattle's Green River back in May 1984, he passed with flying colors. Despite having 42 corpses already buried, the botched assessment gave him a green light to claim a minimum of 6 additional lives. He ultimately confessed to losing track entirely, callously admitting that the sheer volume of his victims became too massive to accurately remember. During his 2003 sentencing, he coldly confirmed his horrific ambition was to butcher as many sex workers as humanly possible, stating he lost count of the bodies. His memory blurred with bloodshed. Thus, we must ask how a vile butcher like Gary Ridgway could easily face seasoned, highly skilled detectives, ace their diagnostic screening, and confidently walk away completely clean. The terrifying truth lies in the fundamental mechanics of the device, which, without any exaggeration, absolutely cannot detect a single lie. Medical professionals universally agree that this crude machinery merely monitors biological panic. It only tracks shifting sweat levels, erratic cardiovascular spikes, and sudden breathing disruptions, created during the early 20th century. Its inventors incorrectly guessed that dishonesty automatically sparked a universal biological panic response, which is blatantly untrue. Biological distress stems purely from raw anxiety rather than falsehoods, meaning a remorseless sociopath remains completely composed. Monsters walk among us completely undetected. Some individuals aggressively train themselves or simply lack the neurological wiring to feel guilt, making beating a lie detector absolute child's play. In 2003, top national scientists published a massive evidentiary study confirming that these machines were totally useless for serious security checks, essentially exposing the deeply flawed and highly unreliable technological foundation. Brain experts and behavioral researchers had essentially been screaming the exact same thing for years. Take the American Psychological Association publicly stated that relying on these devices to catch liars was completely unscientific, totally unproven guesswork. Yet, inside a King County police station back in 1984, cops still treated those squiggly lines like absolute gospel. Gary Ridgway easily gamed the entire system, perfectly keeping his heart rate and sweating completely under control during questioning. He fed the sensors exactly what they needed. Detectives ultimately discovered that the cold perpetrator actively rehearsed extreme calming techniques long before he ever actually sat down in that hot seat. The device purely tracked sheer panic, and this absolute psychopath felt absolutely none. His massive arrogance fully convinced him that he would forever remain a free man. That massive ego served him well until scientific breakthroughs changed everything. By 1987, 3 long years post-test, his name stubbornly lingered inside those massive case files. Even if he wasn't exactly public enemy number 1, detectives aggressively tossed his cars and house looking for criminal evidence. Coming up totally empty-handed, they snagged a quick spit swab on a rag before finally heading out the door. He happily obliged, throwing that evidence into storage for 14 years. That rag gathered dust until 2001. When cutting-edge genetic testing finally caught up to those old dead ends, detectives faced back in 1997, cops pulled that ancient spit out of lockup, running it against biological material scraped from several victims. The results were totally undeniable, leading to his dramatic arrest on November 30th, 2001. By 2003, he fully admitted to eliminating 48 people, earning himself 48 consecutive life sentences. He confessed to a 49th victim in 2011 after bones surfaced near Auburn, Washington. 49 lost souls, all hidden behind one beaten test and one single spit rag. Now consider the Guthrie situation. In mid-March 2026, massive headlines finally proved what everyone secretly guessed. Insiders confirmed early today, completely validating our collective gut feelings, that the whole household totally aced their lie detector exams without breaking even a single sweat. Every single relative easily cleared those intensive behavioral screenings directly tied to Nancy's mysterious vanishing act. That includes Savannah, sister Annie, brother Cameron, and even Tommaso Chione, the final guy definitively spotted near her before she was unexpectedly taken. They all completely knocked it out of the park, according to Chad Ace, an ex-SWAT commander dropping massive bombshells on Megyn Kelly's podcast this March 16th. Top cop Chris Nanos already explicitly laid out those exact same facts. The sheriff pulled absolutely no punches. He completely ruled out all blood relatives and their spouses as involved suspects going forward. Those poor folks have been totally transparent during this nightmare and are genuinely suffering victims themselves. Pushing any toxic conspiracy theories about them is straight up evil. Still, Stubborn internet trolls and toxic online sleuths stubbornly refused to accept those cleared exams as solid proof. Armchair detectives claimed the gear is pure garbage, arguing anyone could trick the wires, making the setup totally worthless. But check out this incredibly crazy twist. Those keyboard warriors actually nailed the technical flaws, yet they completely missed the mark regarding this specific heartbreaking tragedy. Pay attention to this absolutely crucial detail. True researchers know these detectors only actually fail when facing a highly calculated suspect who is incredibly well prepared, who stays totally frosty under pressure, whose brain is literally wired to shut down panic. That exact glitch let the infamous Green River suspect walk free. He was a masterful liar, completely missing basic human empathy, which is hardly a typical trait for average folks. Crucially, investigators used way more than just squiggly lines to officially exonerate the household. An ex-federal investigator breaking down the probe highlighted their ironclad defense, pointing to absolute rock-solid proof they were miles away. Detectives ripped through their phones and online histories, verified clean biological samples, and simply treated those exams as secondary backup data. They successfully passed every single hurdle, meaning those detector scores are basically a massive, irrelevant nothing burger. That angle was always completely useless, because the actual culprit who took Nancy definitely doesn't share her family tree. The predator who targeted her completely caught her off guard, a shadowy figure intimately familiar with her wardrobe and daily routines, who boldly broke inside on February 1st packing a sketchy duffel bag, fully disguised and gloved up, creeping around with horrifyingly precise and heavily rehearsed dark intentions. A phantom intruder spent roughly 40 minutes prowling that exact residence, completely concealed behind heavy gloves and a mask. That trespasser truly believed they played it completely safe, totally oblivious to the invisible traps waiting inside those very walls. Following Nancy Guthrie's sudden vanishing, authorities flooded her property to execute their standard forensic sweeping protocols across the entire scene. Authorities secured everything. Technicians lifted organic residue from doorways, floors, and every surface the perpetrator navigated, fully understanding that covered hands inevitably shed crucial genetic markers deep inside those protective layers. Simply shifting a facial disguise immediately deposits vital cellular evidence right onto that fabric. Clenching a heavy torch between your teeth for hands-free illumination. Exactly as security footage suggested, this individual did while prowling. Guarantees severe biological contamination of the actual device itself. Saliva blankets the equipment completely, inevitably transferring your unique cellular signature onto every single contacted surface. Officials from the Puma County Sheriff's Office verified discovering scattered organic material throughout Nancy's residence. Several distinct genetic traces emerged, yet certain specific samples matched neither the missing homeowner nor anybody established to be circulating within her regular personal and professional social sphere. An absolute stranger left those marks, prompting authorities to blast the mystery sequence through CODIS, the Federal Forensic Indexing Framework. This nationwide criminal archive currently stores roughly 22 million genetic blueprints gathered from convicted felons, detained suspects, and active investigations everywhere. Total failure. Technicians also tested another crucial item, specifically a hand covering discovered roughly 2 miles away from the missing woman's property. This particular item closely resembled the specialized gear spotted on Nancy's security footage during the evening she suddenly vanished. Detectives fed those cellular results into CODIS without success, while importantly confirming those isolated traces differed entirely from the biological evidence pulled directly from the victim's living room. Parabon Nanolabs executive C.C. Moore, who commands tremendous respect as a premier forensic genealogy authority nationwide, offered her professional perspective. She openly declared that biological material recovered indoors carries significantly greater investigative weight than a piece of discarded outdoor gear. Law enforcement leaders further confirmed pulling strange cellular samples from the victim's living space that simply defied easy explanation. These traces bypassed Nancy completely while simultaneously clearing her entire social network, since investigators actually ran comprehensive checks on everybody. Contractors, visiting relatives, and daily guests were universally cleared, making this completely untethered discovery incredibly important from my personal perspective. I find that particular clue immensely valuable since it securely anchors directly to the kidnapping location. Indoor samples represent guaranteed physical presence, whereas discarded items far away demand careful interpretation, essentially leaving us hunting a complete mystery, man's genetic signature. This perpetrator definitely stood inside the active abduction zone. Yet federal criminal systems completely failed to identify his unique biological blueprint. Furthermore, officials in Puma County openly verified their active transition toward advanced ancestral tracing tactics to finally crack this enduring mystery. Striking out on CODIS hardly marks the finish line, making that specific statement absolutely crucial for understanding this entire investigation. For once in modern legal history, a failed search ignites everything. Ancestral tracing takes over whenever traditional systems crash, completely revolutionizing how biological clues operated throughout our long legal past. Historically, technicians gathered drops from violent zones and searched server records, hoping prior convictions kept the dangerous perpetrator neatly filed away for an easy identification. Prior detentions flagged them. Finding a match required previous police encounters, meaning unrecorded perpetrators simply vanished into thin air without leaving systemic trails if the database came up empty. This fragile system eventually broke down, allowing serial predators to escape while unsolved files gathered dust. Novice perpetrators dropped biological evidence but strolled away untouchable until advanced family tree tracking completely disrupted the standard investigative playbook forever. This tracking approach sounds beautifully simple conceptually while proving absolutely devastating practically. Rather than hunting the exact suspect directly, authorities scan public platforms hoping to catch partial sequence overlaps intrinsically linked to a wide web of distant relatives. Overlapping chromosomes essentially guarantee blood relations. When detectives submit mystery traces online, matching algorithms can suddenly highlight distant cousin connections, assuming those specific relatives previously explored their personal heritage through commercial websites. Experts then construct sprawling lineage maps, carefully tracing historical documents and delivery ward papers simultaneously. Funerary records, wedding registries, census sheets, and profiles. Eventually, this exhaustive documentation pinpoints which specific ancestral branch naturally produced the mysterious cellular material left behind during the offense. This tactic brilliantly rebuilds anonymous identities via unsuspecting family members. Essentially launching into massive public awareness around April 2018 through a highly publicized breakthrough, detectives hunted the Golden State Killer. Detectives possessed cellular evidence from a phantom who executed 13 homicides and 50 assaults statewide from the 1970s through the 1980s across multiple jurisdictions. Authorities scanned those drops through CODIS endlessly for years without success. By December 2017, detectives partnered with researcher Barbara Ray Venter to inject that forensic puzzle into a public ancestral network called GEDmatch. The system unleashed a goldmine of distant kin, everyday citizens casually uploading genetic codes just to untangle their ancestral roots. Detectives pieced together a sprawling lineage from those familial ties, shrinking the suspect pool until one identity flashed: Joseph James D'Angelo, a 72-year-old ex-cop blending perfectly into suburban Citrus Heights, California. Law enforcement cruised right into his local subdivision. After snatching up a piece of cast-off trash laced with his genetic material, technicians ran it against the evidence, instantly confirming a flawless hit. D'Angelo found himself in handcuffs on April 24, 2018, eventually admitting guilt to 13 homicides and several abductions by 2020. The Phantom evaded capture for more than 4 decades, yet a simple family ancestry website brought his reign to a brutal halt within 4 hours. Bryan Kohberger taught authorities a completely separate lesson following the slaughter of 4 University of Idaho undergrads at an off-campus Moscow residence in November 2022. A stray blade cover yielded the murderer's biological signature, prompting detectives to immediately bounce the sequence off the National Criminal Database. Striking out there, federal agents dumped the code into commercial ancestry sites, slowly weaving a broader family web. This pointed to a sprawling Pennsylvania clan boasting Italian roots, allowing sleuths to tighten the net and spotlight a prime suspect. Officers quickly pinpointed the home of his dad. Sifting through garbage tossed outside that Pennsylvania property provided a crucial link, proving the man residing there sired the exact suspect tied to the horrific slaughter. Everything pointed straight toward Bryan Kohberger. a guy pursuing his doctorate in criminal justice over at Washington State University. Agents trailed his every move until snagging his genetic profile, securing an identical match to the sheath before slapping the cuffs on him come December 30th, 2022, barely 7 weeks post-massacre. The swift takedown eventually led to his admission of guilt by July 2025. Authorities didn't even use Kohberger's own biological material. Initially, they relied entirely on his dad's garbage plucked directly from a Pennsylvania curb. Over the last 10 years, C.C. Moore practically translated the complex realm of forensic genealogy into concepts everyday folks easily grasp. Serving as the top genealogy expert at Parabon Nanolabs and anchoring ABC's The Genetic Detective television series, she cracked hundreds of frozen mysteries, unmasking both killers and Jane Does through the identical playbook that snared D'Angelo and Kohberger. Far from a talking head guessing on the sidelines, this woman literally wrote the manual modern policing heavily relies on today, sitting down with reporter Natasha Zuvez on the News Nation podcast The Truth of the Matter. The interviewer threw a blunt query her way. What are your true instincts whispering about the Nancy Guthrie investigation? Skipping the vague rhetoric entirely, she handed detectives a hyper-specific blueprint. She urged them to return, completely retest the property, and hunt for something as microscopic as a single sheared-off follicle. Breaking these mysteries wide open only demands a tiny hair fragment without its base nowadays that sets the new standard. Forget massive blood drops, spit swabs, or fingerprint-laden guns. All it takes is one lousy filament dropping when a culprit shifts a disguise. Just a random thread lodging in the rug, snagging on some woodwork, or tumbling onto the linoleum while shifting gear around. That bold assertion is backed by genuine science, since cutting-edge lab magic now pulls core genetic data directly from the actual shaft. Pulling off this highly complex retrieval requires extremely sophisticated isolation and mapping protocols. Success remains far from certain, yet it is entirely achievable, and the second a blueprint forms, the intense familial tracking kicks off. Pruning branches down to a single identity is just step one, as she directly confronted doubts regarding the intruder's meticulously clean methods. Did wearing face coverings, sporting hand protection, and dodging tactile connections successfully erase any biological crumbs? She completely dismisses that notion, firmly doubting the attacker managed to exit without leaving a microscopic footprint somewhere. Authorities suspect he gripped a tactical torch tightly between his teeth. It seems highly improbable he maintained that awkward jaw clench for the entire 40-minute duration of the break-in. Therefore, despite his obsessive cleanliness in trying to avoid dropping clues, removing that item naturally transferred his saliva straight onto his protective outer gear, virtually ensuring he severely contaminated whichever random surface he happened to swipe next. The expert openly theorized about him clenching the illumination tool securely by his jaw. Maintaining that taxing grip for roughly 40 minutes straight simply defies logical sense. No matter the extreme caution exercised to avoid leaving biological markers, pulling that object loose inevitably drenched those synthetic fingers in fluid, practically guaranteeing massive cross-contamination the instant he made contact with any other basic household object. 40 minutes, that is how long a disguised intruder prowled the private residence of an 84-year-old victim. Navigating various hallways required him to constantly bite down on his only source of light. Between grabbing countertops and exhaling heavily, microscopic flakes drifted freely through the atmosphere without needing any physical brushing. Drifting onto tables or sticking to upholstery, these invisible markers make it practically impossible to escape clean. According to Moore's professional intuition, she stressed how incredibly resilient genetic material remains, noting older mysteries completely cracked solely through deeply aged residual traces. Law enforcement is listening closely to every single word. Law enforcement just dropped a massive bombshell about the hunt. They are actively pushing forensic family trees to their absolute limits to lock down a biological match. Translated from bureaucratic jargon, the ancestral DNA hunt is fully operational. Still, we must confront a few brutal realities head-on. Finding a hit using this cutting-edge science relies heavily upon the specific ethnic background of whoever left that biological material. Whenever detectives dig through those commercial platforms, namely GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA, they overwhelmingly pull up white users of Northern European descent. C.C. Moore highlighted this exact hurdle. Should our perpetrator possess strong familial roots tracing back to Mexico or broader Latin America? Hunting him down gets increasingly complicated and dreadfully slow since Hispanic representation on those platforms remains scarce. Federal agents quickly contacted law enforcement south of the border right after Nancy Guthrie vanished. You cannot ignore how crucial that cross-border communication truly is when dealing with these biological roadblocks. Fortunately, these hurdles never alter their ultimate goal. They just delay the inevitable capture. CeCe Moore guarantees cracking this mystery will never drag on for years. Given the massive manpower involved, she predicts unmasking him within a few weeks or perhaps months. That federal genetic tracing unit boasts 200 highly trained specialists, 200 experts scrutinizing a microscopic strand. Remember the profound lesson hidden in a dad's garbage. Just ponder what the Koberger arrest truly proved. It established far more than genealogical tracing merely working. Catching the Golden State Killer already settled that debate. That Idaho suspect proved how incredibly vast and terrifyingly wide this invisible web truly extends. The accused student never submitted his own saliva to ancestry sites. He avoided making any obvious blunder directly linking himself to that slaughter. His downfall came strictly from possessing a dad whose genetic code perfectly matched the biological debris left on a leather weapon cover discarded in Moscow. Detectives never even required the murderer's personal sample initially. They strictly needed his father's blueprint. They harvested that golden ticket straight from curbside refuse. The swab from those discarded items proved their elusive phantom shared blood with an older gentleman residing at that Pennsylvania property. Using that solitary clue, the massive family web instantly collapsed into a single identity. That identity triggered a covert tale. Shadowing him yielded fresh biological material. Those secret swabs ultimately matched the bloody bedroom. Authorities slapped cuffs on him exactly 47 days post-massacre. Now analyze the current ammunition detectives hold for the Guthrie investigation. They possess unidentified male biological material recovered directly indoors. We aren't talking 2 miles down the road, but right at the epicenter. Left, during those 40 horrifying minutes, he lurked inside a Tucson residence, executing his dark mission. The monster responsible for snatching Nancy Guthrie might boast a spotless rap sheet. He completely evaded the federal system, meaning his fluid trace failed to trigger a hit among the 22 million offenders currently logged in their system. Escaping that dragnet hardly renders him a ghost. It merely proves he managed to avoid forced swabbing by the justice system up until this point. However, his old man probably left genetic traces somewhere. Perhaps his mother's brother did too. Some distant relative casually spit into a vial for a heritage site just to discover their ancestral homeland. Each uploaded vial creates a digital tripwire. Every tripwire reconstructs a family branch. Each branch inevitably points straight to a suspect. The infamous Green River Killer confidently lied through his polygraph test. And the machine bought it completely. That primitive device was tracking utterly useless metrics. Back in 1984, tools capable of bending time, weaponizing bloodlines, and sorting through garbage to nail a killer simply did not exist. Come 1987, the trap assembled itself. A cotton swab soaked with spit silently languished inside an evidence box for 14 long years. Once forensic science evolved, that forgotten fabric sealed his fate. The predator kidnapping Nancy Guthrie avoids operating in primitive 1984. He stalks the earth in 2026. Our forensic traps never hesitated. They remain fully loaded and waiting. Judgment Day approaches. Picture that interrogation room. Again, May 7th, 1984. Deep inside King County, Washington. Gary Ridgway kicked back in that hot seat, beat the lie detector, strolled right outside, and cops let him walk away untouched. For 17 agonizing years, the results from that one quiet morning shielded him like armor. The stupid box had officially exonerated a monster. Detectives blindly accepted their false truth. The crude tools of that era were completely blind to the deception he fed them. 49 innocent victims. The force that ultimately broke Gary Ridgway wasn't a brilliant profiler, an anonymous hotline call, a guilty conscience, or a slip of the tongue. His absolute ruin stemmed directly from bodily fluids, biding their time inside a locker until laboratory methods finally evolved. The very second those lab techniques matured, The swab that collected dust for 14 years handed the authorities his entire identity in under a day. Joseph James D'Angelo mercilessly haunted California for over 40 brutal years. Ancestral algorithms apprehended him within 4 brief hours. The Idaho stalker genuinely believed he was untouchable. That ADSS candidate, arrogant enough to think he memorized the entire police playbook, his freedom expired in 47 days. The phantom abducting Nancy Guthrie ran free for exactly 46 days on March 18, 2026. He definitely donned gloves and facial coverings. He strategized meticulously, acting with icy precision. Even accounting for light discipline, he calculated every detail except the impossible variable. The sheer biological reality of shedding cells while existing indoors for 40 unbroken minutes. Biology betrays us all through fallen hairs, lingering exhalations, scattered dead skin, and the undeniable truth of our genetics. Nobody deliberately consents to dropping these microscopic clues across a crime scene. They represent your core existence, relentlessly stalking every single footstep you take. This phantom definitely stood inside Nancy Guthrie's residence. That foreign biological evidence sits on a lab bench today, actively getting mapped against an online heritage platform submitted by a complete stranger, simply hoping to find distant European relatives. This clueless individual suspects their innocent ancestral inquiry will soon resolve the country's most heavily publicized missing person mystery. Our intruder remains entirely ignorant about the millions populating those ancestral websites. He also fails to realize modern forensic tools operate flawlessly without an exact hit. Investigators merely require a tiny fraction. A single genetic link provides plenty of leverage to reverse engineer a killer's exact identity. He remains utterly oblivious that the lie detector, the exact same gimmick that kept Gary Ridgway roaming free for 17 years, offers absolutely zero protection here. Clearing her relatives successfully shut down one investigative avenue. But biological evidence kicks down an entirely different door. Genetic experts claim a single rootless strand cracks these mysteries wide open. Meanwhile, our suspect lingered inside that residence for 40 full minutes. Deception tests completely failed to capture the Green River monster. Microscopic science finally brought him down. This story leaves us with a lesson that reaches far beyond one investigation. Truth may be delayed, but it is rarely erased. A person can hide behind masks, gloves, darkness, and careful planning. Yet the human body itself refuses to lie forever. A single strand, a trace of breath, a drop of saliva, a forgotten detail on a sleeve, these tiny fragments can outlast deception and speak louder than fear. But the deeper lesson is about more than science. It is about justice, patience, and the courage to keep believing when answers do not come quickly. For families living in agony, every day feels unbearable. For investigators, every clue can feel too small. Yet history proves that persistence matters. What once looked impossible can become undeniable through time, discipline, and relentless effort. This is also a warning to anyone who believes cruelty can be planned perfectly. Evil often mistakes silence for safety. It forgets that modern truth is built not only from witnesses, but from memory embedded in places, objects, and even the smallest traces of our existence. In the end, this story reminds us that justice does not always arrive dramatically. Sometimes it arrives quietly, through one overlooked clue, one honest voice, and one unwavering refusal to give up on the missing, the vulnerable, and the truth.